I would like to introduce our speakers today. So we have Jackie Wille. She has a Master's of Science degree, well, two of them, from UW Milwaukee in both vocational rehabilitation counseling and special education. She has worked with individuals with disability as a teacher and as a vocational rehabilitation counselor for over 30 years. Her knowledge of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders comes from being an advocate and a caregiver for a man suspected with FASD, that would be the short term of how you say that diagnosis, for over 30 years, and from her study of the condition for the last 8 years. She's a member of the Orchids FASD services and a representative to the National Organization for Fetal Alcohol Syndrome. She is the founder of the Wisconsin FASD Coalition, which has organized a statewide fall FASD conference for the last 2 years, and it's coming really soon, so I'm sure you're going to mention that. And then we also have Jamie, who's right over here, Jamie Klein. He's the program director for Aloha Communities, Platteville. Aloha Communities is a licensed residential home for young adults with FASD. Jamie is a social worker with experience working in adolescent residential care and in case management for Child Protective Services. He received his Master of Social Work degree from Clark University in Dubuque, Iowa, and completed his bachelor's degree in psychology and political science at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. He's a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, during which he served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Jamie is originally from central Wisconsin, currently lives in Platteville with his wife Nikki and his son Ira. Turning it over to you, welcome.
Well, thank you for having us. I'm going to start, and Jamie's going to go after me, so, oh, I got one. I'm the one that asked to have a passport. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, right, that, you passed, just take one of each, because there's 3 different things. I should have stapled them all together, but I didn't think about adding the others till later. I have half an hour to give you a talk that took me 75 minutes the last time I did it. So that's why I actually took some of the slides out, but I've given you this because I'm going to go really fast through some of this stuff. So, I know, you're eating lunch and this is your kind of break time or whatever, so if you want to look at this, and they didn't come out as good as well as I'd like because they're kind of small to reach, so you have to go home and get your magnifying glass. So all these slides are on the handout, and then I've also got a handout of resources, which is always nice to have, I think, and then a flyer on our conference coming up the 13th. You're all invited in Madison, and there will be parents and individuals with FASD there, and you will definitely learn a lot more firsthand if you're able to come to that conference about what parents experience and what we're doing in Wisconsin to try to address the needs of families dealing with FASD. So the first part of my program is to give you basic information about FASD, and the second part is to talk about what it looks like and what we can do about it. Because I think that's what you guys are more into. First, hands-on, in the trenches, dealing with behaviors and things that you're trying to interpret and provide support for. So I apologize. It says Shepherd College. I had a typo. Sorry. The first slide is just a shout out to the common misperception that alcohol is not the most serious teratogen that will affect a fetus. People think cocaine, all these other substances are more serious and we need to be more aware of them. The effects of alcohol are lifelong and it's a brain injury. So we have a lot of misinformation out there, and it continues. And there's a lot of speculation as to why that is. We like our beer in Wisconsin. One possible reason. Okay, this did not come through. Don't know why. I'm going to skip it. Oh, this has little things on it. It's going point by point. I've never done this before. Thank you. Okay. FASD or fetal alcohol spectrum disorders is it's not a diagnosis itself. It is an umbrella term that covers a spectrum of problems, and I'm going to jump over to what the spectrum is. FASD is lifelong. Neurodevelopmental problems often worsen over time, especially without intervention. So it's really important to diagnose this. Some of the things you might encounter as a diagnosis are FAS, fetal alcohol syndrome. These other two are not as common. The most other common one is ARND, or English stands for alcohol-related neurodevelopmental disorder. The birth defects that come as a result of alcohol can be cardiac, can be cleft palate, can be escape my mind. But anyway, there's a number of birth defects. So it's kind of messy, and that's one of the reasons that doctors don't diagnose it that much. It's just kind of messy. It's a spectrum of disorders. The latest one is the latest way of defining it is in the DSM-5, so that a psychologist or psychiatrist can give the diagnosis of alcohol-related neurobehavioral disorder associated with prenatal alcohol exposure. So as you can see, like, what does all this mean, you know? It's not a simple, it's kind of like autism being a continuum and being confusing. There's still playing around with the diagnosis in terms of medically how to describe medically what we see. Sometimes people will say full FAS, full fetal alcohol syndrome. That is not the most severe, although sometimes people think that it is. Numbers-wise, the most common is ARND, and FAS is like a small percent of the people who have fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. How many people care about all this medical stuff? Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm not like putting you all to sleep. There's a lot of important things in here, but there may be more. Some of it is more important to doctors and people that are doing the diagnosis, but you will get the diagnoses, you know, you may get that in the file, so I kind of want you to know a little bit about what it means. Another interesting, a good point is that there are things that people with FASD have in common, but somebody may have an area that is more severe than another, so it's not like, you know, everything is more severe together. You're probably used to that with the individuals that you work with. This is a really important point. A majority of individuals with FASD will not have any visible characteristics. Sometimes if you're familiar with FAS, to get the diagnosis for FAS, it requires a certain facial characteristic. Nose, eyes slightly eyes wider, and smaller openings. The people who have that diagnosis are a much smaller percentage of the people with the total people who have FASD and FASD, because when the fetus is developing the face, it's only during a certain month of gestation. So, a certain week of gestation, not month. So it depends on when the mother is drinking, and it depends, there's a lot of different combinations of causations for the different effects that you see. So the face doesn't mean that something else that you don't see might be more severely affected. And basically, the disability of having a certain facial characteristic is not the most severe thing that you can have in life. You know, it's not the thing that's going to keep you from succeeding in school or having other problems in the community. But how many people know that FASD has some kind of facial characteristic? Have you heard that before? Okay, I thought that was pretty common knowledge. Not everybody knows that, but don't be misled by the idea that if you don't have that face, you don't have FASD, is because many of the people who have severe effects from cognitive effects or behavioral effects will not have the characteristic face. All right, here's, oh, it's just downloading. Okay, this is how common is FASD. I'm going to jump to that slide. Women and alcohol, we drink in Wisconsin. 1 in 10 women drink. We drink before, if we're even thinking about getting pregnant. We can expose our fetus, our unborn child, because we don't know we're pregnant yet. So, you know, we don't know we're pregnant till sometimes 2 months in. So even if you're thinking of getting pregnant, don't stop drinking, please. There's no safe time or amount to consume alcohol during pregnancies. Half of the pregnancies are unplanned. So we end up with, the latest research is estimates of 2 to 5%. And this is the Philip May research. So here it is on a chart. This is all of the fetal alcohol spectrum up here. This is autism. This is Down syndrome, right here. 1.4 in 1,000. Fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, 24 to 48 in 1,000. That's the full range of them. Something wrong with this picture because you don't have anywhere that percent of children diagnosed with FASD. And then, I'm sorry, this one here, I skipped it, is the FAS, the fetal alcohol syndrome. Like I said, that's 9 in 1,000, so it's like about a third of the total number of individuals with FASD. Any questions about this so far? Yeah, 24 to 48. It's 2.5 to 5%, 2.4 to 4.8%, actually, the Philippines study. So you're going to encounter, what this means is you're going to encounter individuals who are not diagnosed. So that's why I think it's really important for us to know more about what we might be seeing. And these are the populations in which FASD is higher than those rates, that's the general population. So 6% of FAS, 16.9% of the children in child welfare are estimated to have an FASD. Foster care system and many children with FASD are in adoptive homes. They're because they were unable to be cared for by their mother. They end up, because they're undiagnosed and don't get supports, in the inmate population. And the Department of Corrections doesn't even screen for it. So we're really behind. And that's not true. That's true in all states, not just Wisconsin. These are some of the problems that can occur when an FASD is not recognized or supported. And also, it's just concurrent issues that go along with FASD. Mental illness, 94% of individuals with FASD also have a mental illness, including substance abuse disorder. 50% of adolescents and adults display inappropriate sexual behavior. 60% of people with FASD have a history of trouble with the law. 61% of adolescents with FASD experience significant school disruptions. That was a study of a huge number of people back in 2004 that indicated the things that go along with FASD. So it's something that really we need to be aware of and supporting services for people. So this is I like this slide. It's just examples of that FASD can look like just about all of these people have FASD. And this was a campaign where there's a little, underneath it, there's a little biography of each person. You can find this on the internet, and I just put it together in a composite. So there's not one particular typical book. Also, FASD is worldwide. It doesn't just happen in the United States because people use alcohol in other states, other countries. People with an FASD can be extremely loving. They want to be liked. Artistic, bright in some areas, helpful and willing. They have a lot of strengths, which make the part that doesn't seem to be connecting more surprising sometimes. So we, and you guys know this, we always want to start with people's strengths, so we don't want to just talk about what they can't do. So we always want to start with looking at what their strengths are. I thought I skipped this slide. Infants and children. So you will see that this is more of interest to you. Actually, some of the characteristics of individuals with FASD, of course, they carry through the lifetime. So the irritability of a child, of an infant who can't sleep in the night or has feeding difficulties, when that individual, that child becomes older, it looks a little bit different. But you still going to have maybe sensory issues around food or regulatory issues around sleep, noise, changes in environment. And these are things you guys deal with every day. So it's not like completely unusual. It's just that the issue is if it's not diagnosed. Some of the difficulties that jump out are the difficulty with concrete versus abstract. So how many people here teach simply with concrete language? Is that what you guys do with everyone?
How many try?
We tried to.
So my friend, who I've mentored for 35 years, has an IQ of 110, and he knows more words than I do. He has a huge vocabulary. But he interprets things literally. So I get in trouble all the time when I say something to him, and he said, but you didn't say what you mean. Why don't people say what they mean? So yeah, you have to be careful what you're saying, or you'll be misunderstood, and you'll misunderstand what they. Oh, somebody just gave me the greatest example the other day. Never mind. I can give you a ton of really cool examples. The functional areas of academics. Let's go into memory difficulty. Another characteristic is, I can't remember if I took my medication this morning. Maybe I should take it again, but I don't remember if I took it or not. So, or I don't remember this morning if you told me this today or 2 days ago. That whole time continuum, memory continuum, it seems to be jumbled up with a lot of people with FASD. So what can look like willful, not doing what you're asking them to do, is often, and they will also they'll cover up, because a person with FASD, like any developmental disability, this is their whole life. This is how they operate. So they don't quite know when you ask them to do something at a certain time that you have a better sense of time than they do. So they say, oh, I think I did it, or I don't know, or yes, I did do it, because they don't know, but they know you expect them to have done it. And they go more off on what you're expecting of them than their own memory, which is faulty, of whether they did it or not. So you're going to be confused and look at, it's often easy to see that behavior as somebody doesn't want to tell me the truth because they didn't really do it. And it's taken me a long time to learn that they actually it was a person with FASD may not remember whether they did it or not, but you're standing there asking them, expecting that they will know it, and if they don't tell you that they know it, but they're, not wanting to tell you the truth. So the memory difficulties are brain-based. This is a brain injury, like a head injury, will result in some similar types of things. After having a head injury after birth. The poor judgment comes in with not knowing about consequences. The inability to understand cause and effect means that somebody asked me to go to Florida for spring break. Isn't that what kids do? You know, I'm 18, I'm 19, I'm 20. Kids go to Florida for spring break. But a person with FASD doesn't see, well, I have to make sure the car that I'm driving belongs to me, for one thing. And I have to make sure that the brakes are in good condition, or I've got money for gas. They don't think into the future. They think right now. And this is somebody with an IQ of 110. That's the person that did this.
So you got your
So,
keys? Okay.
it is not only something big like going to take a vacation in Florida like everyone else does, that they don't plan ahead. It could be for just about any, everyday types of things that would occur. Something like that would occur. Okay, so let's see what else I got here. Some people with FASD have an intellectual disability, but as I've said, not everyone does. Only 60% have an IQ below normal. The IQ of individuals with FASD has been seen to go from 29 to 140. So I think if you look at the bell curve, there's more people with FASD. The bell curve is a little shifted to the left. And even when they have an IQ that's higher, it's not an indicator of how well a person can perform with functional capabilities. Something such as the Vineland or some other type of testing, you want to look for that when you get a referral of somebody that, let's say you have an IQ score on somebody. Do you guys all get the files on everybody and you look at that kind of stuff? Does everybody get that? So you know that pretty much. So let's say you have somebody with an IQ, but no, do you get people with the Vineland or any other adaptive functioning scores too sometimes? Okay, good. People with FASD oftentimes are not given that. So you might want to ask that they have that done if they don't come with one and you're seeing functional issues even though the IQ is higher, because we don't always give that to kind of assessment to people who have a higher IQ, and you can, with a functional behavioral assessment, you can find the IQ and the academic scores be very high, age appropriate, and then you can find the everyday living skills, the language, the communication down at 8 years old, at half their age. So you find huge differences, and it's really important to get that evaluated. So this is just more about what adaptive behavior is. I could have taken this out. Executive function. That's an area that's difficult for people with FASD. Planning ahead, understanding time, cause and effect. Attention is often regulation and regulating attention and focus. That's often an issue. Tolerating frustration. I'm sure you guys are masters at that, I'm sure. Right? So, and the thing about the secondary problems is when someone fails something or disappoints their parent, and their parent doesn't know what the problem is, and the parent feels like a failure, it gets labeled on, it gets sort of dumped on the child. You know, like, why aren't you acting better? You know, they say at school you have a high IQ. How come you made this stupid mistake, and how come you keep doing the same thing over and over again? What they call secondary problems are what that does to your self-esteem and your sense of yourself, the acting out behaviors that can occur as a result of that miscommunication, misunderstanding, that this is not willful. And what they found is that once the person is diagnosed and you understand more about the brain is not capable, rather than the person is intentionally not doing something, the secondary problems will go away. So a lot of the initial problems, if somebody's not diagnosed. So the good news is that let's get them diagnosed and we can understand and give more appropriate expectations of this person. There will be less failure and there will be all of the other things that trickle down from that. That's the secondary. This is a list of people who can screen for FASD, just about anybody, which includes you guys. So a family history of substance abuse, symptomatology of FASD, history of being in a foster adoptive care or involvement with the Child Protective Services, having a sibling with an FASD, behavior problems that are not responding to traditional methods of behavior management. Rewards and punishments do not work often unless they're immediate and directly connected to the behavior, although I haven't had a good luck with that, even as I tried to show the direct connection between an act and the bad thing that happened, and maybe you don't want to do this, and maybe we'll reward, what I'm told is just give me the instructions, don't give me any explanations, don't give me these rewards and punishment things, just tell me what you want me to do. So the more complex, sometimes those traditional methods of behavior management, and also I will mention in here cognitive therapy that's insight-oriented, where you have to understand what you did wrong, to change it. It just doesn't connect. So that's the kind of thing where if you're using your traditional methods and they're not working, it certainly is something to look at, whether there's a cognitive issue that's preventing the person from, they're on a different wavelength, they're not understanding what you want through language or through difficulty seeing what you're assuming that they understand, but they didn't see what you thought that everybody would see that. A lot of people are diagnosed with autism who have an FASD, and a lot of people are diagnosed with ADHD. But it's true, there are slides that explain the differences between ADHD and FASD, and FASD can be more complex. I guess I'm not going to go into that right now. All right, so the good news is that we can do, are there any questions so far? I got 5 more minutes. We're good. So the good news is that if you even suspect, a lot of people won't be diagnosed that have FASD. If you suspect that you've got somebody that you think is lying or stealing, running out of the classroom, not completing tasks, not following directions, not showing up, unmotivated, disorganized, breaks behavior contracts, keeps making the same mistakes, doesn't seem to care, or is off into fantasy thinking. And you get that feeling that you tried everything and nothing is working. This is just a reminder that if the person has been exposed to alcohol and that has affected them, all of these areas of the brain get bathed in alcohol, and they all are responsible for all the things we do: memory and learning, sleep and attention regulation, spatial memory, coordination of our movements, timing, sensory processing. You guys know a little bit about the basic brain things, but think about it, alcohol goes to the whole brain. So, emotional regulation, impulse control, just reminder that it's complicated when we try to break a behavior down into what might be happening cognitively inside that person's brain. But understanding the FASD brain gives us alternative ways to approach a situation. And I would have loved to spend 3 hours, because that's what I like to do, talking with you about what you would do with different situations to modify it, change our expectations. And demeanor is really important, and I think you guys probably know this. If you're triggered and overwhelmed and with a behavior, you're going to trigger the person that you're with. So you got to calm yourself down, the very first thing you got to do, and change your expectations. Avoid demands and accusatory questions. Questions like, why did you do that? That makes no sense to most people with FASD. It's too abstract. Or, what are you doing? Like, I don't know what you, because of their literal interpretation of words, what are you doing? What does that mean? What do you want to know? What, I mean, I'm standing or I'm breathing. I mean, it doesn't, the assumption that I see you doing something you know you're not supposed to do, and when I say, what are you doing, you're going to tell me because you know what it is I'm thinking about what it is you're not supposed to do. That's what we think when we say, what are you doing? But that, to a person with FASD, is a ridiculous question. What do you mean, what am I doing? I'm standing here looking at you. What? I don't know what you want. So, my friend with FASD, with suspected FASD, thinks the whole world doesn't know how to use language, and he has this translation problem all the time. He just thinks that's the way the world is. So, concrete language, don't ask how, when, or why did you do that. That doesn't make sense. Allow, that's the other thing, processing, and you guys deal with processing delays, probably receptive. So that lots of times there's a receptive processing delay. And also an expressive, so I have to process what you asked me, and then maybe, 3 minutes later, that'll come to me, what it is you wanted, or what my answer is to what you asked me. Because our world goes so fast and it's not slowed down like I'm doing today, going so fast. People with FASD often blurt out the first thing that comes to their mind as an answer. And anybody with a processing delay oftentimes, I think, does that same thing. So you might not, whatever they say might not even be the truth, might not be what they want. Like, what do you want for lunch today? Or what are we going to get at the store? They might blurt something out because the process is moving on, and they know you wanted an answer, but they didn't have time to think what they would really want. So then later you go to the store, and they say, I don't want this. Then you can say to them, well, we talked about it, remember? This is what we planned to buy. They might not remember that, and they don't even remember what they told you because it just was blurted out at the time. It wasn't connected to a thinking process. They didn't have time to think about what they might really want. So, I mean, that's pretty frustrating, isn't it? Because you think people are on board and they gave made a choice, but they were just answering a question that was demanded of them at that time, and the whole thing went too fast for them. Some people with FASD are better to do something, give them time ahead of time, and give them, allow them to answer in writing. So, like for a menu thing, you might say, we're going to be doing our menu tomorrow. Why don't you think about this? Here's a form you can fill out, and then you can bring that form with you so that when we discuss the menu, you already thought about this. Because the normal process of that discussion in a group probably is not going to be a good way of communicating back and forth with somebody with an FASD. That's just one example. Oh good, I'm almost done. I'm sorry, I don't mean to say that I want to be done, but I really am struggling to get this. This is my passion. I love talking about this. So if you want to ask me questions afterwards, or there's my contact information, I can give you more information. This is a list, and you have this in your notes. Change your things to do differently with a person with FASD. Change your assumption or labeling of the behavior. Don't start by labeling in your mind you were lying, or labeling in your mind you were stealing. Try to find out, calm down, yourself down, and say, tell me about, what just happened. And be very slow and very patient to that person. If they think you're upset, you're not going to get anything out. You guys know that too. Develop a non-judgmental and curious interest in the person's experience. Engage with an open-minded heart. If you're already afraid, they're going to pick up on that. If you're already angry, they're going to pick up on it, even if you don't say anything. Try to learn from the person what happened. Be patient and don't interrupt. Don't make it like an interrogation. Listen for discomfort. This is something I've learned. A person with FASD generally cannot hide discomfort. If you do not observe discomfort, you probably did not intend to do anything wrong. So if you're not coming with an accusatory attitude toward someone with an FASD, and you just say, hey, you know, hey, what's going on? You're going to get a totally different answer if they're very relaxed. That's a good clue to you that they don't know they did anything wrong. They didn't intend to do something wrong. So they're not very good at conning. They're not very good, well, they can be manipulative, but they're not good at complex, telling you one thing and really intending something else. Anyway, this is not important. People with FASD generally do not plan ahead or hide their tracks. That's why they're in the criminal justice system. They don't plan ahead, and then they don't hide what they did afterwards. And obviously modify the environment. And I think that's my last slide. Oh, the resources. This is a book, I read a great book on FASD educational strategies for teachers. It looks like this. And I think if you can read the small writing, this is where you can get it from. You can order it. These are some of the, it's got 200 pages. These are some of the local Wisconsin resources, the national resources on FASD. And that's it.